Before luxury became a lifestyle, before fashion became a global business, there was one woman who changed everything. Her name was Gabrielle Bonheur Coco Chanel, a woman who started with nothing, broke every rule, and built an empire that would define elegance for more than a century. She liberated women from corsets, made simplicity the ultimate form of sophistication, and turned her name, Chanel, into a symbol of timeless style. But behind the pearls and perfume was a life filled with pain, ambition, betrayal, and controversy. A woman admired by millions, yet judged for her choices. This is the story of Coco Chanel, the orphan who built a global empire and changed fashion forever. Gabrielle Bonheur Chanel was born on August 19, 1883 in Saumur, France, to a poor family. Her father, Albert Chanel, was a street vendor, and her mother, Jeanne, was a laundrywoman. They lived in poverty, moving from place to place, always struggling to survive. When Gabrielle was just 12 years old, tragedy struck. Her mother died of illness, and her father abandoned her shortly after, leaving young Gabrielle and her siblings in an orphanage run by Catholic nuns. It was there in that cold, silent convent in Aubazine that the girl who would one day revolutionize fashion learned her first lessons in discipline and design. The nuns taught her how to sew. Her uniforms were simple, black and white, austere, elegant. Those early years would shape her taste for minimalism, a style that would later define the Chanel brand. But at the time, she was just a girl with a needle and thread, and a dream to escape the shadows of her past. At 18, Gabrielle left the orphanage to work as a seamstress. By day, she sewed clothes. By night, she sang at local cafes and cabarets. One of her songs was called Qui a vu Coco, Who Has Seen Coco? And soon that nickname stuck. She became Coco. Performing brought her into the company of wealthy officers and aristocrats, a world far from the orphanage walls. It was during this time she met Etienne Balsan, a wealthy ex-cavalry officer who became her lover and introduced her to the life of luxury she had only dreamed of. In Balsan's world, Coco met high society, women dressed in lace, feathers, and suffocating corsets. To Coco, they looked more like prisoners than beauties. She once said, "Luxury must be comfortable, otherwise it is not luxury." That belief became the seed of her revolution. While living with Balsan, Coco began designing hats. Her designs were simple, elegant, and unlike anything Paris had seen. Soon, women began asking for her creations. They were refreshing, modern, and liberating. In 1910, with financial help from Arthur Boy Capel, another lover and the true love of her life, Coco opened her first shop at 21 Rue Cambon, Paris, named Chanel Modes. Boy Capel believed in her vision, that fashion could be elegant and comfortable. He financed her early ventures, and with his encouragement, Coco expanded. By 1918, she opened boutiques in Deauville and Biarritz, catering to wealthy women vacationing by the sea. She introduced jersey fabric, typically used for men's underwear, to women's fashion. It was revolutionary. Her dresses were light, flowing, and free, a stark contrast to the tight, restrictive styles of the time. Coco Chanel had given women something new, freedom of movement and style. Her designs captured the changing spirit of the 20th century, women who wanted to move, work, and live on their own terms. In 1919, just as her fashion empire was taking off, tragedy struck. Arthur Boy Capel died in a car accident. Coco was devastated. She later said, "His death was a terrible blow to me. In losing Capel, I lost everything." That heartbreak became the silent force behind her empire. She threw herself into work, channeling her grief into creativity. Over the next decade, Chanel transformed from a boutique owner into a fashion icon. She popularized the little black dress, the tweed suit, costume jewelry, and the quilted handbag, items that would become timeless classics. Each design reflected her philosophy. Simplicity is the keynote of all true elegance. In 1921, Coco decided to create a perfume, something that captured the essence of her brand. She collaborated with perfumer Ernest Bose, who presented her with several samples. She chose the fifth one and named it Chanel No. 5. It was the first perfume to blend natural and synthetic ingredients, creating a scent that was both fresh and mysterious. It became an instant sensation, especially after Marilyn Monroe famously said she wore nothing but Chanel No. 5 to bed. The perfume wasn't just a product, It was a statement. Coco had captured the essence of femininity in a bottle, and it made her rich beyond imagination. But her business deal would later cause years of controversy. To distribute the perfume, Chanel partnered with Pierre Wertheimer, a businessman who provided the capital and distribution network. However, the agreement gave her only 10% of the profits, something she would bitterly regret later. It was a decision that haunted her for decades, as she felt cheated out of her own creation. When World War II broke out, Coco closed her fashion houses, claiming it was not a time for fashion. But behind the scenes, her life took a darker turn. She began a romantic relationship with Hans Günther von Dinklage, a German officer, a move that would stain her legacy forever. During Nazi-occupied France, rumors spread that Chanel collaborated with German officials. Declassified documents later suggested she even worked as an informant for German intelligence under the codename Westminster. Why would she risk everything? Some say it was survival. Others believe it was personal revenge. She tried to use her Nazi connections to reclaim full ownership of her perfume company from the Jewish Wertheimer family. But history would judge her harshly. When the war ended, many collaborators were arrested and some were executed. Coco Chanel was interrogated, but surprisingly, she was never formally charged. Some say she was protected by powerful friends, including Winston Churchill, whom she had known through her earlier affairs with the Duke of Westminster. Fearing further investigation, Coco fled to Switzerland, where she lived in self-imposed exile for nearly a decade. By the early 1950s, the world had changed, and so had fashion. Christian Dior's new look dominated Paris, with its cinched waists and voluminous skirts, the very style Coco had once liberated women from. At 71 years old, many believed her career was over. But Coco wasn't done. In 1954, she made a stunning comeback, reopening her fashion house on Rue Cambon. Critics in France mocked her. They called her designs outdated, uninspired. But across the Atlantic, America loved her. Hollywood stars and elite women embraced her tweed suits and minimalist elegance. Her comeback collection was a success abroad, proving that Coco Chanel was still the queen of fashion. Her designs became the ultimate symbol of modern femininity, confident, comfortable, and elegant. Once again, Chanel defined an era. As Chanel's empire expanded, so did the myths surrounding her life. She was admired for her genius and independence, yet criticized for her arrogance and manipulation. She claimed to be self-made, yet her path was paved by wealthy lovers. She promoted liberation, yet aligned herself with oppressors. Coco Chanel was a woman of contradictions. She said she never cared about money, yet fiercely fought for control of her fortune. She preached simplicity, yet lived surrounded by luxury at the Hotel Ritz in Paris, where she resided for over 30 years. Even her image was carefully curated. She reinvented her past, hiding her orphan childhood and creating stories that made her appear born into grace and elegance. But perhaps that was her greatest talent, reinvention. Coco Chanel didn't just design fashion, she designed herself. Coco Chanel worked tirelessly into her 80s, still overseeing designs and fittings, still smoking her trademark cigarettes, still demanding perfection. She lived alone, surrounded by mirrors, lions, and her legacy. On January 10, 1971, at the age of 87, she passed away in her suite at the Hotel Ritz. Her last words, according to her maid, were simple. "You see, this is how you die." Even in death, she was composed, elegant, and unapologetically herself. Her funeral at the Church of the Madeleine in Paris was attended by the biggest names in fashion. Her coffin was covered with white flowers, camellias, her favorite. The world mourned not just a designer, but a visionary who had redefined womanhood. Decades after her death, the House of Chanel remains one of the most powerful brands in the world. Under designers like Karl Lagerfeld and now Virginie Viard, the brand has continued her vision, mixing tradition with innovation. Chanel No. 5 still sells millions of bottles each year. The interlocking CC logo is one of the most recognized symbols in fashion. But beyond the glamour, Coco's legacy is complex. She broke barriers, a woman in a man's world, an orphan who built an empire, an icon who made women feel powerful through elegance. Yet she was also flawed, ambitious, secretive, and at times ruthless. Perhaps that's why her story continues to fascinate us. Coco Chanel wasn't just a designer. She was a revolution wrapped in silk and scandal. Today, every time you see the double C, smell Chanel No. 5 or slip into a little black dress, remember the woman behind it all. A woman who rose from an orphanage to rule the fashion world. A woman who lived by her own rules, loved deeply, lost painfully, and built an empire that still stands strong. Coco Chanel, a legend, a rebel, a mystery. Her life was not perfect. It was controversial, complicated, and magnificent, just like the woman herself.